There is pressure from outside. Winning takes money. Team budgets average in the tens of millions of dollars. And the companies who write those checks want nothing less than worldwide exposure in the most flattering light. Anything less, and they will take their millions elsewhere. The pressure from within the teams is enormous. Owners demand results, and a driver's toughest rival may be his own teammate. Winning itself may not even be enough to keep a job. You must win often, or look elsewhere. Finally, there is pressure from outside. New faces hungry to make their mark at the pinnacle of world motorsport. Now there is a new face with a legendary name knocking at the door. Today is race day, and Grand Prix pressure reaches critical mass once again. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to the Grand Prix that was never meant to be, the Grand Prix of Hungary from the Hungaroring in Budapest. This race was originally left off the 1995 calendar, but when Grand Prix in Japan and Italy came into jeopardy, Hungary was added once again to the schedule, and we are glad to see it. The story this weekend is simply Michael Schumacher, who it would appear has committed to Ferrari, and that affects everyone else. Jean Alesi says he will not be Schumacher's teammate next year, while Gerhard Berger says it might be an interesting proposition. Mika Hakkinen appears secure at McLaren, but who will his teammate be in 1996? Johnny Herbert has a victory for Benetton as Schumacher's teammate, but he may well be out of a drive. And David Coulthard, thought to be a future star with Williams, may have to look elsewhere as well. Damon Hill desperately needs a victory. He is concerned only about this year's championship. Derek Daly is with me as always, and not just the Drivers' Championship is at stake here.
Indeed, in the all-important World Constructors' Championship, a new name may be added to this impressive list of teams this year, because quite frankly, Benetton as a team, led by their superstar driver Michael Schumacher and their flamboyant team manager Flavio Briatore, have simply done a better job this year with 5 wins to their credit. For the Williams team, although Damon Hill has shouldered much of the recent criticism, as a team they have not shown themselves to be strong enough, and too often these cars roll to a halt with mechanical failure. Ferrari as a team have also been substandard, stranding Berger with a loose wheel at Silverstone, running him out of fuel in Canada and struggling to refuel him in France. And just for kicks and grins, let's take a look at some telltale numbers here between Williams and Benetton. In 18 starts this season, the finishing rate of Benetton is much higher, 72%. Now, despite a glitch in Canada, they have a 100% reliability finishing record. But look at the points per finish. Benetton have scored less points per finish than Williams, which basically means had Williams been reliable this year, had they stayed on the racetrack, at this point of the season, they would actually be leading the World Championship. Moving to daily news, there was a controversial rewrite of the overtaking rule and issued this weekend. It says as soon as any part of the passing car is in front of the car being overtaken, the driver in front cannot close the door. Boy, this is against the fundamentals of racing, and after much discussion and controversy, it was rescinded this morning. Jacques Villeneuve has in fact signed a multi-year contract with Williams and will be announced officially this week. Jean Alesi, we believe, will complete the driver swap at Schumacher and move to Benetton. Minardi may use Ferrari V12s next season. Minardi is a member of the family who runs the oldest Fiat dealership in Italy, and they have used Ferrari engines on and off since 1976. Despite his victory at Silverstone, Johnny Herbert may be about to lose his seat at Benetton to Jos Verstappen, who may race for them in Belgium.
And so it goes in the pressurized "what have you done for me lately" life of a Formula One Grand Prix driver. This ESPN Speed World presentation, the Formula One Grand Prix of Hungary, is brought to you by Texaco Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car, take it to the star. And by Speed Stick by Menon. Like you, it never quits. Bob Varsha and Derek Daly with you for the Grand Prix of Hungary. Let's review the highlights of practice and qualifying. Pedro Lamy returns to Formula One with the Minardi team following his savage crash in practice a year ago, and he's been doing a wonderful job. Damon Hill under tremendous pressure at the track where he took his first Grand Prix win back in 1993. He took provisional pole with a very quick lap. John Alesi had a tougher time of it. This big 100-mile-an-hour crash destroyed the Ferrari's front suspension and made for a quick trip to the hospital for Alesi.
Alesi's trouble didn't finish there. Saturday, he got it wrong also at the 80-mile-an-hour chicane. No harm done this time. Michael Schumacher got himself in trouble. And look at this dragster-style burnout. No damage. Damon Hill, right after he set the pole position, also does a harmless 180. Didn't quite get stuck on the gravel trap.
Now let's take a look at our starting lineup. Damon Hill, his fourth straight pole. He calls it the most crucial of his career, starting alongside David Coulthard, a man for whom time is running out. To talk about winning, he's got to do it. Row 2 will be Michael Schumacher, a new bridegroom, having married his longtime girlfriend, Corinna Bench, following the German Grand Prix. Gerhard Berger alongside with what he calls a moral pole. I got absolutely everything out of the Ferrari. Row 3 will be Mika Hakkinen as the McLaren Mercedes team continues to improve. Hakkinen $5,000 lighter after speeding in the pit lane in the warm-up. Jean Alesi will be alongside in the Ferrari. On row 4, Martin Brundle in the Ligier, standing in for Aguri Suzuki as that team continues to shuffle drivers. Johnny Herbert will be next to him in the Benetton. Row 5 will be Olivier Panis of France in the Ligier, next to the Sauber Ford of German Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Row 6 will be Luca Badua of Italy in the Minardi, doing a good job for the team this weekend. He'll start alongside the McLaren of Mark Blundell. Row 7 will be Rubens Barrichello of Brazil in the Jordan Peugeot, alongside the Minardi Ford of Portuguese Pedro Lamy, returning to Formula One. Row 8 will be Eddie Irvine, who was 7th after Saturday qualifying, but lost those times when he received an illegal push start. He'll start alongside Mika Salo of Finland, another man who, even though he's driving at a racetrack he's unfamiliar with, has not shown the results thus far that were expected of him. Row 9 will be Ukio Katayama of Japan in the second Tyrrell, starting alongside the footwork hard of Japanese Taki Inoue. Row 10 will be Jules Bouillon of France in the second Sauber, next to the footwork hard of Italian Massimiliano Papis. Row 11 will be Roberto Moreno of Brazil in the constantly improving 40 Ford, alongside Andrea Montermini of Italy in the Pacific Ford. And on our final row, Pedro Diniz of Brazil in the 40 Ford, alongside Giovanni Lavaggi of Italy in the Pacific Ford. As the cars prepare to roll off on a hot day in Hungary with a huge crowd on hand, here are the drivers' point standings coming in. A 21-point lead for Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill second, Jean Alesi in third. In the Constructors' Championships, it is Benetton. And as Derek Daly mentioned, Benetton looking very strong. The question today, what will their pit strategy be? They won with Michael Schumacher here in Hungary a year ago with a 3-stop strategy. Derek, let's talk a little bit about the racetrack.
The track here at the Hungaroring is tight and twisty. It's very dirty offline. Track position is so important here because it is so difficult to make a pass. There are elevation changes, uphill, downhill, particularly through some of the corners. And patience is rewarded here because frustration levels build when a faster car is following a car that's slower and they have no room to pass. Top speed along the front straight, 180 miles an hour. And here is one of the looks at some of that elevation changes.
Back in 1989, Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari passed 12 cars en route to victory, but more often in the history of this race, it is the first man to the first corner who dictates the pace and often wins. Look at our weather conditions. As I mentioned, it's been hot and sunny Friday, Saturday, and today. The chance of rain very low, humidity very low, but it is much warmer than that 83-degree number might indicate. Here's a look at past winners at the Grand Prix of Hungary. Michael Schumacher most recently, Damon Hill, the beginning of a 3-race victory streak back in 1993. Ayrton Senna, one of the more successful drivers in the short history of the race here at the Hungaroring. A Hungarian by the name of Ferenc Zis won the very first Grand Prix in 1906 in France, driving a Renault. And Hungary has played a role throughout the history of Grand Prix racing. Back in 1936, they raced through a park in central Budapest. And they've also held races at the international airport. But now it is the Hungaroring, and this may be the last Grand Prix here at the Hungaroring, as other circuits updated to contemporary Formula One standards are demanding races in the future. Once again, all eyes will be on the start and whether anyone will jump it. I should correct a statement I made at the German Grand Prix. They do not use light beams to detect false starts. There is actually a sensor built into the racetrack under each car, and it uses the onboard scoring transponder to dictate whether or not the car was moving at the green light. Now the field is set. The first corner is all important, and there is often contact there. The green flag waves at the back. We await the red light and then the green. Damon Hill is on the outside of the front row, nearest the camera. He gets a great start. Michael Schumacher slow to get away, and he almost gets caught by Mika Hakkinen. It is a Ferrari alongside Schumacher as they head to the first corner. Hill, Coulthard, Schumacher, then a Ferrari and someone trying the outside.
Mika Hakkinen got squeezed, but look at the Ligier of, I think it's Brundle, down the inside, side by side with Mika Hakkinen.
Plunging downhill, very steep through here. Passing the chicane off to the left of the screen that used to be a part of the circuit but no longer used. Now rocketing uphill towards a very fast left-hand kink, and then this long, long right-hander.
Across the top of the hill, down to the chicane. The chicanes are 80 miles an hour down through here. Very cautious, very careful on the opening lap. Damon Hill now has a buffer zone between himself and Michael Schumacher.
Many of the drivers in this field are seeing this racetrack for the first time. Their learning curve is very steep. There's David Coulthard in second position. Now they run the long downhill twisting section toward the back of the pit area right there. Damon Hill, a strong left-hander, and then maybe the most important turn on the course, a right-hander onto the high-speed start-finish straightaway.
Fast right-hander. Look at Damon Hill lead. He said this could be the most important pole position of his career because he needs to get away from Michael Schumacher, and he needs to win this race if he is to have a realistic chance of winning the World Championship. Quick look at the McLaren, again using the central mounted rear wing. In fact, 3 different teams this weekend are using that wing. Minardi and the Pacific cars also have it.
Downhill through a section of the track that Nigel Mansell in the Ferrari back in '89 used to make many of those 12 passes en route to victory. Once again at the top of the hill. There is Schumacher, then the Ferrari, and then the McLaren. This is the corner where David Coulthard went off the track and hit that fence in the foreground last year, ending his race. Looks like Eddie Irvine got a good start as well, and he is running well up into the top 10. Bit of a slide there from David Coulthard.
Two Williams boys staying in touch with one another, pulling away from Michael Schumacher. Schumacher was the fastest man on the racetrack this morning. Damon Hill was not happy, so the racetrack seemed to be very dirty, very slippery. That is a problem here at the Hungaroring. This track is so little used, there is not enough time to get enough rubber down to make these cars consistently fast. So Friday is usually a washout. Saturday gets faster, as it did yesterday. But unusually, Sunday morning was very dirty, and Damon Hill complained. Martin Brundle running ahead of John Alesi.
The fastest 3 cars in the warm-up were Schumacher. The Benetton always works well on full tanks. As you watch Mika Hakkinen was second fastest. John Alesi, with whom you now ride, was third, and Damon Hill was fourth.
What a sound from the Ferrari V12. The V10 engine is due to be in a car very shortly. The V10 packaging is what Ferrari are after, not the historical value of using a V12, but the packaging, the lightweight, the fuel consumption of the V10 is what John Barnard wants to have for next season under Michael Schumacher. It's not official yet that Michael Schumacher will be there, but for all intents and purposes, the 20 million plus that he was demanding has been found through a variety of sponsors, mainly Marlboro, and Michael Schumacher will drive that Ferrari next season.
Damon Hill continues to draw away from David Coulthard in a replay of what we saw at the British Grand Prix 2 races ago, as Hill took pole and then moved away while Coulthard led the train behind him. There is Gerhard Berger.
And the most impressive of the opening lap so far has to be Eddie Irvine, because in a racetrack that is so difficult to make passes, he has gone from 15th all the way to 8th place. Look at David Coulthard under pressure, sticks a wheel onto the dirt.
We'll take a quick timeout and return for more live coverage of the 10th round of the 1995 Formula One World Driving Championship. Hakkinen is off. Back live at the Grand Prix of Hungary. Bob Barsha, Derek Daly with you. Damon Hill continues to draw away from this field. A man under enormous pressure following his off at the end of the first lap in our most recent round in Germany.
In fairness to Damon, although he has shouldered so much criticism, particularly because of that crash in Germany, Patrick Head, who's not apt to making statements, did in fact make a statement after Germany and said it is possible a mechanical failure contributed to Damon leaving the road, because there were witness marks on the left-hand drive shaft showing that it was dry of grease, showing excessive wear. And although Frank Williams himself, because I spoke to Frank earlier this week, he said it's unlikely it was the cause. He said it is not beyond the bounds of possibility that did contribute to Damon's incident.
Running in second place, David Coulthard holding up world champion Michael Schumacher. Now, in that listing of the top 6, you did not see Mika Hakkinen. Just before we went to break, Hakkinen pulled off the racetrack, and here it is.
And this is a dead Mercedes here. This is the development engine that they used in Germany for the first time. Hakkinen, second fastest in the warm-up this morning, showed signs of a very promising result. The car on full tanks again was faster than it showed in qualifying. But look at the race here with David Coulthard all over the curbs, trying to hold off the world champion Michael Schumacher. Under pressure is David Coulthard. And of course, this allows Damon Hill a clear road. Look how much faster Schumacher is on the way to the apex. He is clearly a faster car at the moment, but the frustration level sometimes goes up because there is precious room to make a move down the inside of a car that's only just a little bit slower.
You mentioned that the track here in Hungary is used only for this race. It gets very, very dirty offline. All of the cars are starting on the softest Goodyear compound available. One of the Pacifics is off.
Johnny Car Wash is in the gravel trap, so he will need a car wash to clean that thing up. So he's been the slowest man in every session, and now he doesn't even have to wait to be lapped.
Off at that very quick left-hand kink at the top of the hill. The battle for second place continues. The Scotsman, David Coulthard, keeping Michael Schumacher behind him, which may in fact be a part of his role to play with the Williams team this weekend.
And that may play into the pit stop strategy decided by Benetton. They are all running on the softest D compound tires, which give the cars a lot of grip. However, the wear rate is very high, so it is anticipated that most of the teams will have 3 pit stops this afternoon. Schumacher locks up those front tires. Blue smoke pours from them.
Back up front, Damon Hill, quick look in his mirrors. He has a clean straightaway behind him as he continues to draw away from this field. Now look at the left of your screen, all the marbles. Getting back to my point about the D compound tires, they will throw off a lot of used rubber, and it will get very, very dirty offline, compounding the problem when one car tries to overtake another.
Watch Schumacher's line. He's actually faster than the David Coulthard when he turns and dives to the apex, as Damon Hill again confirms just how quick he is on the racetrack, setting the fastest lap for the second time, just over 1 minute 20. See, he's a second a lap quicker than David Coulthard, who quite honestly is spending most of his time watching his mirrors, trying to hold back the world champion. But Schumacher, after he gets off the brakes and turns to the apex, seems to be faster than David Coulthard.
77 laps scheduled of this 2.46-mile circuit. 70 of them remain. This is one of the slowest races on the Grand Prix calendar. The drivers refer to the Hungaroring as Monaco without the buildings. It is that tight and twisting, and it could take much of the 2-hour time limit to complete this race. Last year's event run at about 1 hour and 46 minutes. The very first race here back in 1986 was stopped short of its conclusion at the 2-hour time limit. look at the lead Damon Hill has been able to open up.
And he may need that, because the Williams team is not known to be as fast as the Benetton team when they go down the pit lane at 75 miles an hour. 75 is the speed limit. It was 50 miles an hour all through practice. Eddie Irvine still flying.
We're watching the battle for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle, Jean Alesi, Eddie Irvine. Then back to the battle for 2nd. Coulthard to the right and Schumacher to the left.
There again you see it. Under braking, turn to the apex. Schumacher much faster. However, when you put the foot down and you jump on that 720 horsepower, Coulthard accelerates away from these apexes, and Schumacher can't quite get close enough. Look at Schumacher, or look at Coulthard. Under pressure, gets it slightly sideways. I can't imagine David Coulthard being under more pressure this year than right now. Jacques Villeneuve will take his position in the team. David Coulthard will probably move to McLaren. McLaren retains an option on his services for next season. And now he's trying to prove that he is fast enough to warrant a position in a top team.
Here's a look at the top 6, the points-paying positions. 10, 6, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And Hill needs all of those 10 points. And it helps him if David Coulthard can hold Michael Schumacher back. Berger, Brundle, and Alesi round out the top 6. Then Eddie Irvine up from 15th on the grid. Johnny Herbert runs 8th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 9th, and Olivier Panis 10th. There is Roberto Moreno in the 40 Ford. This team so small but with such great ambitions. They hope to have a semi-automatic transmission. They're the only team without one, but they hope to have one online by Belgium in 2 weeks' time. Roberto Moreno's race is run. He joins Giovanni Lavaggi on the sidelines. After Panis in 10th, Mark Blundell is 11th with the only McLaren Mercedes still in the field. Rubens Barrichello is 12th, Mika Salo 13th, Luca Badua 14th, Pedro Lamy 15th, Ukio Katayama in the 16th spot. Then Max Papis, Taki Inoue, Jules Bouillon, Andrea Montermini, Pedro Diniz.
You can see there from the World Graphics that Damon Hill is pulling at least a second a lap on David Coulthard, and in fact the last lap he pulled 1.5 seconds. So David Coulthard is so busy altering his line, trying to hold back Michael Schumacher. It is giving Damon Hill clear road and clear sailing to pull away and give himself a nice cushion when he makes at least 2 pit stops and maybe as many as 3.
Virtually all of the teams come into this race after heavy testing schedules over the last 2 weeks. All of them have been in action. All of them have been adding mechanical and aerodynamic tweaks to the cars, trying to get that last bit of downforce for this racetrack. Cars officially out of the race, leaving 21 still in the running as the Ferrari team prepares for the first of as many as 3 pit stops. And that does not look like routine pit maintenance right there. Could be early problems in the Ferrari camp. We'll take this opportunity for a timeout. Pit stops will be coming very shortly. Stand by for more live coverage of the Formula One Grand Prix of Hungary. Welcome back to the Grand Prix of Hungary as the Williams team prepares the pit board for David Coulthard. You ride with Michael Schumacher. That's Coulthard just ahead in 2nd place. Damon Hill has simply checked out.
Bit of breathing space now for David Coulthard. Schumacher not all over the back of him. Can he slice through traffic as well as he needs to? Schumacher is exceptional at slicing through traffic.
Working lap 12, and we're already lapping cars. That's Pedro Diniz of Brazil in the second 40 just ahead. He slides over and lets the racers come through. While we have a moment, let's take another look at that start. The all-important first corner here in Hungary.
And watch in particular Mika Hakkinen on row 3. He tries to go between the Ferrari and Schumacher and doesn't make it. But Eddie Irvine further back goes down the inside, makes a blinder of a start, and gathers up 3 or 4 positions. And Rubens Barrichello was a victim of that early lap because he has disappeared all the way down to 12th place.
Eddie Irvine was 15th on the grid after having his Saturday qualifying times thrown out for an illegal push start. And he launched himself past the 12th place starter, Mark Blundell, with that terrific getaway. Here's a look at Michael Schumacher trying David Coulthard. Now here's where those new rules come into effect. Once Coulthard saw that Schumacher was coming alongside, he had to let him by. Of course, under any interpretation of the rules, Schumacher had the line. And so Michael Schumacher is now in second place and will do everything in his power to run down Damon Hill before that all-important pit stop. Here is where the top 6 in points are presently running. Schumacher now up to second rather than third. Damon Hill is first. John Alesi back in 6th. Johnny Herbert 8th. David Coulthard now 3rd rather than 2nd after that pass. And Gerhard Berger in the 4th spot.
So David Coulthard, who in Germany had a golden opportunity to show how potentially fast he could be if he could have run with Schumacher, he wasn't able to there. And yet again here, while his team leader runs away and hides, Michael Schumacher finally finds a way past David Coulthard, who is just not on the pace of Damon Hill. And Schumacher now with clear road. Let's see just how fast he can go on those D compound tires. See, can he catch Damon Hill?
Here's where he spun in Saturday qualifying while trying to catch Hill for the pole. He is down 15 seconds and already has opened up a big margin over the 3rd place runner, David Coulthard. A lot of interesting discussion going on in the garages and the motorhomes up and down the pit lane. In the Ferrari camp, Fiat chairman Gianni Agnelli said, "It is my understanding that Michael Schumacher has been hired." Schumacher has been walking around telling everybody who will listen this weekend that he has not signed a deal yet. And no doubt the chemistry in the Benetton garage is a little bit different. Pending an official announcement on Schumacher's future. Well, here we are with the battle for 4th. Gerhard Berger leads the Blue Ligier of Martin Brundle. John Alesi in the Ferrari. Eddie Irvine, after that great start, now runs 7th. And Johnny Herbert 8th. Alesi's Ferrari with Brundle just ahead. Oh, one of the Arrows cars has stopped. Is that Taki Inouye? I believe it is. Inouye running in 18th. Looks like a pretty comprehensive meltdown for that Brian Hart V8.
And they still say this Hart V8 is a delight of an engine to work with. The packaging is perfect, and very seldom you see this. A major blow-up for that Hart V8 engine. Oh, he runs over. Oh. You see that?
Getting hit by a safety car. The Arrows team had an interesting announcement at the recent German Grand Prix. Oh, here's another look. Watch the driver in the red suit, Inouye, trying to tell the crews what to do. Steps away, then, tries to come back with a fire extinguisher and takes a heavy shot in the left leg.
That is absolutely unbelievable that a safety car would run over a driver like that. How lucky he is that he didn't break his leg.
Well, we've seen that comedy before. Most recently at the Grand Prix of Monte Carlo, in which a safety car hit one of the Arrows cars, flipped it. It's even harder in replay than it was in real time, and Taki Inouye is hurt.
I can't believe he's not hurt. He took quite a whack from that car, from that safety vehicle, and they haven't even got the Arrows car off the racetrack yet. Where is he? Is he on the ground? I believe he's on the ground behind that safety car.
I believe that's right. Taki Inouye, ironically, was the driver who was hit by the safety car at Monte Carlo. Inouye was sitting in his car with his belts off at the time. The car flipped, and he suffered a concussion. So Taki Inouye has reason to feel a little paranoid regarding the safety workers in Formula One. David Coulthard, his first stop in the Williams pit. Tires all around. About 10 seconds worth of fuel on board. This taking place on lap 16.
12.8 seconds, not spectacular. As is customary, we will follow very closely how long these cars stay in the pit lane, because it has a marked effect on the outcome of this race sometimes. Damon Hill, they are ready for him to make his first pit stop, but 12.8. Oh, look at this. He's taken almost 3 seconds off Damon Hill's lead, who was over 15 seconds ahead at the time that Schumacher passed David Coulthard.
Leaders coming around to lap the other arrows. Meanwhile, Damon Hill, the race leader, is in the pits. Williams pitted right at the leading edge of the pit lane. In he comes. Oh, we have a crew cam.
We can't see much from it, but we do have it.
Oh, a Jackman camera. Pretty quick stop for Hill. Looks like a 3-stop strategy. Oh, and Schumacher pits right as Hill leaves. That was close.
So Hill will retain the lead, obviously. 9.6 versus what? Oh, 6.7. Again, we see the Benetton just shave seconds off everybody else's pit stop time. What a demonstration. Almost half the time spent by David Coulthard. 6 seconds to 12 seconds.
Gerhard Berger's Ferrari is serviced. Long stop for Coulthard, shorter one for Hill, which suggests that Williams has split their strategies. Coulthard maybe on a 2-stop strategy, and Hill on a 3. Eddie Irvine among the cars now leaving the pits.
And that's the difficult thing to monitor. How much fuel do they want to put into these cars? David Coulthard was there a long time. The fact that he stopped first, though, suggests, as you say, Bob, that he may try and go just with one more stop.
Michael Schumacher, worn tires, low on fuel. Excuse me, he just made a pit stop. He's got good tires and all the fuel he needs.
And this is where he is so good. On the in-laps, in the pit lane, and on the out-laps. He is spectacular on the out-laps in particular. That's where he makes up lots of time on his rivals. Now let's look back to the gap. This is the world graphics. As soon as Schumacher crosses the line, we'll see it, and the gap is 11.6 seconds, which is a bit better than it was just before that pit stop. It was just over 12 seconds.
Lazy runs 3rd, Herbert 4th, Coulthard 5th. Now, the history of the Benetton has been that it is better in race trim than in qualifying. So Michael Schumacher may have the better car at his disposal right now. The Ferrari rockets downhill. Olivier Panis in the Ligier pits. Lots of rumors about this team. Will they move to Britain next year? Will Tom Walkinshaw, who will assume ownership of this team, call his favorite technical director, Ross Brawn, away from the Benetton team? Well, here's one of the Pacifics going off. Was this Lavage's? Excuse me, it's one of the Tyrrells. That is Mika Salo straightening out one of the chicanes. Salo is a pretty interesting story. Another of those guys who was supposed to come in and star in Formula One. But he has had problems. He's been on and off the racetrack just about everywhere.
Look at this here. Max Pappas blocks the Williams. Clearly try to come down the inside. Max Pappas either didn't see him. I presume he didn't see him because he blocked him so badly.
Down that dirty inside line. To finish my point about arrows, their announcement at the German Grand Prix was that they are going to award 7 fully functional Formula One Arrows cars to winners of a contest sponsored by an American company called Global Brands. You see Jean Alesi bring the Ferrari in. With the car, you also get team credentials for the 1996 season and driving lessons from Gianni Morbidelli so that you can take full advantage of your new acquisition. They're calling it the ultimate dream. For a Formula One fan, I guess it would be. Out comes Jean Alesi in the Ferrari, into that tight right-hander going downhill. Not great sight lines for the driver.
The tire warmers do warm. Ooh, gee, that is scary when you hope that the car you're passing sees you and stays offline.
We'll step away for a moment and return for more live from Budapest. Welcome back to the Grand Prix of Hungary. Don't forget the Bud at the Glen coming up later today, live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, as Mark Martin goes for 3 in a row. The Bud at the Glen, live here on ESPN later today. Mark Martin's been making some interesting statements that he doesn't expect to win 3 straight. Not the kind of thing a team manager or owner like Jack Roush wants to hear, I'm sure. But he has pole, and it should be a great race at the legendary Watkins Glen. Here in Hungary, Damon Hill has the lead, but Michael Schumacher closing in. There you see the gap, 8.595 seconds. David Coulthard basically not a factor back in third. Heinz-Harald Frentzen doing well with the Sauber, but he has yet to make his first pit stop. Mark Blundell 5th, Rubens Barrichello 6th.
And Eddie Irvine, who we tracked earlier, got in all sorts of trouble, fell all the way back to 11th place. Now here's an interesting graphic. Look at this. You would think Schumacher was hand over fist quicker than Damon Hill, but in fact he wasn't. Damon Hill lost a lot of time in that lap traffic when we saw him trying to pass Max Papis. That lost him 2 seconds on 1 lap alone, but it looks as if Damon Hill can match Michael Schumacher lap for lap with speed at the moment. And Damon Hill is driving very well, because on close-up to the Williams you can see he has that nice controlled drift as he turns into the corner. So Damon Hill having a good day, and this man here, the world champion, doing all he can to chase him down.
55 laps remaining. Michael Schumacher sporting his new wedding ring this weekend. Married Corinna Betch. Personally, I thought it was Lisa Marie Presley, but they tell me it wasn't. There you see, fast lap of the race thus far, 120.5 for Schumacher. Hill, Schumacher, Coulthard, Frentzen, Blundell, and Barrichello. Behind them, Jean Alesi pitted the Ferrari. He now runs 7th. Gerhard Berger 8th in the other Ferrari. Johnny Herbert 9th in the Benetton. Martin Brundle 10th in the Ligier. Then Eddie Irvine now 11th. Olivier Panis 12th. Mika Salo 13th. We saw him on and off the racetrack earlier. Luca Badois 14th. Pedro Lamy 15th. Ukio Katayama 16th. Here's Andrea Montermini with the Pacific. Bit of a green stripe in honor of the Lotus team. A lot of aerodynamic tweaks to that car, running one of those extra wings. The Hill-Schumacher gap down to 8.031 seconds. So Michael Schumacher, with clean track, appears to be closing in once again.
And when you watch the close-up pictures here of this Benetton, you can see under braking and the turn into these corners, this car is very, very twitchy. And that's what Johnny Herbert said this week also. In fact, Schumacher himself said the car was very unstable. However, Schumacher seems to have the confidence that this unstable feel doesn't seem to slow him down, whereas Johnny Herbert just can't seem to get on with it and go as fast as the Michael Schumacher. Look at this.
Problems in the Minardi pit. The fueler having an argument with himself. I don't know what the problem was there. This is Luca Badois. A long pit stop, and that will hurt him.
Luca Badois, who went so well to qualify 11th. In fact, this team goes to great pains every weekend not to tell you how good their car is, but to tell you who they beat. All the big name engines that they start ahead of on the grid, and emphasizing the fact that they are by far the fastest of the Cosworth ED, which is basically the customer engine, as Frentzen comes in.
Heinz-Harald Frentzen in and out. There is race leader Damon Hill coming around to lap Pedro Diniz for the 2nd time.
Now as things settle down, Damon Hill has a battle on his hands, losing now about 1/10 of a second per lap. That was the gap from the time before. There's the pit board, 7.6 plus 24 is to David Coulthard, so they know they're well clear of David Coulthard. Traffic plays a role in these races. It moves aside. Look at the dirt that gets kicked up by the wheels as Damon Hill moved offline to get to the braking zone. 6.9 seconds. So Schumacher is catching as Katayama brings the Tyrrell in. Tyrrell still running without the Hydrolink front suspension. They had 2 days testing at Silverstone. They developed a new rear wing on this car, giving it more downforce. But quite frankly, this Tyrrell has been a disappointment as this season has gone on. Yamaha have said that they are planning an all-new V10 engine for next season, and that Tyrrell will use that new V10. David Coulthard not a factor. The gap between him and Michael Schumacher gets bigger with every lap. Barrichello still in that points-paying position, and Eddie Irvine still languishes all the way back in 10th after a bad pit stop.
4 cars officially out of the race. 14 cars remain on the lead lap, and all kinds of problems here for Michael Schumacher getting around Pedro Diniz.
You see in the cockpit, you see his hands, moves violently. See the car twitch as he turns in. The back begins to get away. Michael Schumacher can cope with that handling as opposed to Johnny Herbert, and that's why you see the gap beginning to come down. It didn't come down that time. We presume because Schumacher had to make his way past that backmarker traffic, the 40 car of Pedro Diniz.
You make a good point there that he's handling it better as Diniz makes his pit stop. That Schumacher is handling it better than Johnny Herbert. I don't think anyone would question the fact that Schumacher is naturally the better driver. But Schumacher's description of the problems of the car in a way helps Johnny Herbert, because he's been saying all year long, the car is twitchy, I'm having trouble dealing with it. Now Schumacher is saying, yes indeed, this car is very twitchy, making Herbert look just that little bit better. Mark Blundell running on a race-to-race contract with McLaren this year, but giving the team great results, going all the way back to the season opener in Brazil where he stood in at the last minute for Nigel Mansell. Quick left and right, back into the pit lane up to 75 miles an hour, then across this line and launching into the first turn.
Mark Blundell was one of the drivers who voiced his displeasure with the new rewrite of that controversial rule that they rescinded. He said it's like going back to driving school. If you're supposed to move over and let the car behind pass, he said you might as well put indicators, or in American language, turn signals on the car. And Schumacher comes in for another stop. This is a surprise. This is an unusual strategy. Look at the oil smears on his helmet. Pedro Lamy in trouble. Did such a great job with that Minardi all weekend.
Trouble finding a gear, it would appear. And out comes Schumacher right in front of one of the Williams cars.
So David Coulthard can't even take advantage of a second pit stop by Michael Schumacher.
Going to have to double check our pit statistics and make sure that is the second stop for Michael Schumacher. We saw Benetton in and out earlier, and I assumed it was Schumacher. It might well have been Johnny Herbert, in which case this might be Michael Schumacher's first stop, and he might be on a 2-stop strategy. Double check those numbers. Having difficulty with timing and scoring.
Now, if David Coulthard could squeeze his way past Michael Schumacher, it would be a tremendous help for Damon Hill. But Michael Schumacher, even at the early stages, fuel and tires that are almost up to working temperature. The tire warmers do bring them up to a certain temperature, but there's nothing like racing temperature, which you get after about 1.5 laps. And David Coulthard is not going to be close enough to make a challenge of Schumacher.
Yep, confirming Michael Schumacher has made 2 stops by the 50-lap mark, going for optimum fuel and traction from new Goodyear rubber. We'll be back live to... Welcome back live to the Hungaroring, near the little village of Magyarad, about 10 miles outside beautiful Budapest, Hungary. Bob Varsha, Derek Daly, glad to have you with us for round 10 of the Formula One World Driving Championship. There you see comparative fast lap and last lap, most recent lap times for Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. Hill continues to lead the race. Schumacher has made his second pit stop very early. No word yet as to whether it was his decision or if it was forced upon him by the circumstances. The running order is Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard well back in third, then Jean Alesi up to fourth in the Ferrari, Gerhard Berger fifth, Johnny Herbert sixth, Martin Brundle, Eddie Irvine, Mark Blundell, and Rubens Barrichello round out the top 10. And Schumacher goes around one of the Pacific cars. Now, we've mentioned that the big announcement of the weekend did not even take place here in Hungary. It came from Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, where the CART PPG IndyCar World Series is visiting this weekend, as Jacques Villeneuve announced that he will leave IndyCar to go Formula One racing next year. We caught up with him at Mid-Ohio to get his thoughts on the change.
Very excited, but to tell you the truth, I'm not even thinking about it right now. All that counts now is this race and the championship. Yeah, it's not that it's a better series or it is bigger, it's international and so on, and the technological level is higher, and the cars are much faster in the corners and brake harder, but it's not like a big step up like Atlantic or Indy Lights to IndyCar. It's not the same type of step.
Now, will there be a new Villeneuve era in Formula One following his late father, Gilles Villeneuve? That remains to be seen, but it is exciting news for Formula One.
And I believe it's a very good move for Jacques Villeneuve. People say he should have stayed another year in IndyCar, would have done him no harm. That is correct, particularly with Team Green, such a good team, and how they have developed the brilliant young Jacques Villeneuve's career. But I'm a great believer in momentum, and he has the momentum in his career right now to continue to climb that ladder, and the confidence level that he will take to Formula One. I just believe that the timing is right for the move.
Sweeping downhill.
Is hill.
And the season has gone more or less downhill. But Damon has come to grips with it. As mentioned earlier, the team is willing to state that his crash at the end of the first lap in Germany may have been mechanically induced. In fact, Patrick Head went on to say the wear on one of the half shafts at the back of the car was very unusual, and there is very little question that he probably would not have finished the race even if he stayed on the racetrack.
And he lost 2 seconds to Michael Schumacher 2 laps ago trying to pass this traffic. Is he as good as Michael Schumacher at slicing through traffic? It's doubtful, because Michael Schumacher is a bit like Ayrton Senna was. Particularly good, almost intimidates drivers when he appears in their mirrors. They automatically move over for him. And Damon Hill, for some reason, has not commanded the same type of respect on the racetrack. And that could contribute to some of his difficulties when he's lapping some of these back markers.
Saw Damon Hill going by Heinz-Harald Frentzen. It's unusual to call him a back marker. Yes, he is at the back of the lead lap, but he is one of the coming men in Formula One, rumored to be in the mix for a couple of teams in the near future, although he is suffering from a fever this weekend. Both he and teammate Jules Bouillon have been suffering from the flu all weekend.
Now here's Damon Hill's problem here, to move through this battle. There's a traffic jam ahead of him. The 40 car will probably move over. Yes, he does. He's good at using his mirrors. We saw him do that earlier on. But when you get to a battle, when 2 cars ahead of him are fighting among themselves, it's difficult for them to move over, and that's what's happening right now with Jules Bouillon just ahead of him in the Ligier.
Ligier moves over. Olivier Panis. On a 2.4-mile racetrack, it's very hard to get away from anybody. Now closing up on the Sauber.
V10 Renault engine should be able to pull out here. There's his pit for 21.3 seconds to Schumacher. That can't be right.
I wonder if that was...
that might have been an earlier pit board that our host broadcaster has given us here.
Hungarian television bringing us these pictures and sounds from the Hungaroring. Built back in the early 80s, hosted its first Formula One Grand Prix in 1986. And this may be the last one. We're barely 100 miles from all of the tragedy and unpleasantness in Bosnia and Croatia, but there's very little impact felt here in Budapest, at least outwardly. There is a huge crowd on hand, many of them, of course, Germans, who have come through what used to be East Germany across the border to watch their man Michael Schumacher and Heinz-Harald Frentzen in action.
And there's the telltale. Both drivers are running about 2 seconds a lap slower than they were earlier because of this lapsed traffic. Gives us a chance to look back at Eddie Irvine, who is now beginning to catch Martin Brundle. Irvine, on that bad pit stop, was ahead of some of these boys earlier on. He seems to be playing catch-up all day. On a racetrack that's so difficult to pass on, It was a mighty blow to him on Saturday when he was disqualified from the 7th place starting position. And incredibly, he made up all the time in about 4 or 5 laps.
Uphill. You see that Shell logo right there on the racetrack, painted on the grass. Shell is rumored to have made a deal with this team, Ferrari, for 1996. If so, it would end a long association for that team with Agip, the Italian brand. It was rumored that Shell offered up to $25 million for that contract, which of course would go into the kitty to help pay for an important driver change, such as Michael Schumacher. We'll take a timeout while the action cools and be back for more live coverage of the Grand Prix of Hungary. Stay right there. Back live at Hungary. The battle continues as Damon Hill leads the Grand Prix of Hungary, rising to the occasion in a race he desperately needs to win. This is the battle for 5th spot. There is Gerhard Berger, followed by Johnny Herbert, then Martin Brundle. Eddie Irvine was a part of this battle, but he just peeled off into the pit lane, so Mark Blundell in the McLaren Mercedes moves up into 8th.
And to emphasize the fact that he is rising to the occasion, Damon Hill on the last lap just set the fastest lap of the race. Michael Schumacher did have it at 20.5. Damon Hill just brought that down to 20.2. And on the same lap, and there it is there, 23 seconds now of a lead for Damon Hill over Schumacher on the same lap. Look at Schumacher now lapping in the 122 bracket. So Damon Hill clearly now has the speed over Michael Schumacher. Schumacher's tires obviously have gone off a little bit.
There you see the update that baseball fans everywhere did not want to see. Mickey Mantle has passed away. I suppose all of those in my generation can remember when the toughest part of a sandlot baseball game was choosing up sides and deciding who was going to get to be Mickey Mantle on the day. Bye-bye another slice of American pie. Tragic day in sports, and we'll have all the latest details on Sports Weekly following today's race. Battle for 5th continues. Gerhard Berger, much speculation about what his future holds. Will he stay with Ferrari and potentially be Michael Schumacher's teammate, or will he go elsewhere? Ron Dennis says the door is open at McLaren. In fact, Ron Dennis says McLaren will announce their plans for 1996 within the next couple of weeks. David Coulthard brings the Williams-Renault in. The team once again wearing their Rothmans Tobacco livery for the first time since before the French Grand Prix. Take us all the way back to Canada at Montreal, the last time that tobacco-sponsored companies were able to wear their livery.
David Coulthard's stop was 4 seconds faster than his first one, 8.8 seconds, 12.8 for that first one. So we presume, well, we can presume it was going to be a 2-stop race. At this stage, it becomes a bit of a jumble. Remember, there are more stops because of these D compound soft tires, and Berger and Johnny Herbert are in the pit lane at the same time.
There goes Berger. And here comes Johnny Herbert. Despite the fact that he won the British Grand Prix, his job very much in jeopardy as Benetton decides what to do now that Schumacher will move on.
So we presume Johnny Herbert took on more fuel that time than he did on his first stop, because that was 3 seconds longer than his first stop. They went in 6th and 7th positions. So with 40 laps remaining, they will still be one behind the other. Berger leading Johnny Herbert, and it will take about 2 laps for timing and scoring to catch up to tell us exactly what their position is now. So Damon Hill still 23.5 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher.
We've run 37 laps of this 77-lap race, and many drivers have already got 2 pit stops in. Could it be we will see 4 pit stops in this race? Damon Hill has yet to make his second stop. Donna Lacey has not yet stopped for the second time. He runs in 4th. And here comes Damon Hill, the race leader. Almost threw it away right there in the entry.
This is the racetrack here also, so you got to be on the limit. Then he jumps on the brakes down to the speed limit, 75 miles an hour. You see Brundle is in also. But here's the critical pit stop. Should be able to get in, get service, and get out and still retain the lead over Michael Schumacher. Oh, it looks reasonable. 9.4. Now, where is Schumacher?
Nice to see the onboard camera, but we need to see the racetrack. Comes out just behind Olivier Panis.
Michael Schumacher's behind him. Watch the top of the picture. There's Schumacher right on the top of the picture. Now the race gets interesting. Damon Hill, fresh tires, a load of fuel. Now the race gets interesting. Not even halfway yet. And everybody that matters has made 2 stops.
Olivier Panis just ahead is now back on the lead lap, running in the 12th spot.
Good day for Damon Hill. 2 mistakes at the British Grand Prix and the German Grand Prix did tend to blot his copybook just a little bit, but he is not that prone to making mistakes under pressure in these races, and he knows how vital it is this afternoon to stay ahead of Michael Schumacher, but pit stop strategy may yet play a role here.
In fact, Damon Hill's ability to rise to the occasion has been noticed elsewhere. He has received an IndyCar offer, in fact, several of them. All Damon will say is he's received some interesting phone calls in the last week or so, and it's very nice to be recognized for what you can do. Pappy's heads for the pit lane. Michael Schumacher tries to draw up to race leader Damon Hill.
You mentioned an IndyCar offer. We believe that may have come from Carl Haas from the Newman Haas team, who has a liking for the European flavor. So many times he's brought over people like Patrick Tambay, Alan Jones, and of course the famous encounter with Nigel Mansell, who was so successful winning the championship in his first year of IndyCar racing.
In fact, another man said to be in the picture at Newman Haas is former Formula One driver Christian Fittipaldi. 39 laps in, Hill and Schumacher right there, and David Coulthard 36 seconds back. Stay with us. We are back live just outside the beautiful city of Budapest, Hungary, at the Hungaroring for the Formula One Grand Prix of Hungary. Bob Barsha, Derek Daly with you. Damon Hill goes around Eddie Irvine and puts Irvine between himself and the second-place car of Michael Schumacher.
And all the time that Damon Hill lost was because he was following Eddie Irvine, who finally moved over. But Schumacher was all over the back wing of Damon Hill before he slipped past Eddie Irvine.
Eddie Irvine was running in 11th spot. 10 cars remain on the lead lap. Next up, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, right there ahead of Damon Hill in the Sauber.
And that's what we mentioned earlier, Bob. It's difficult for some of these lap cars just to simply move over and get offline because they are in a personal battle. Frentzen and Eddie Irvine were in a battle, and now look how far behind Eddie Irvine is. Look at Schumacher, kicks it sideways. That's where he spun earlier. We showed you that in the highlights, but he is giving it everything. And Frentzen does move over, lets Hill by. Now he's got to move over, let Schumacher by.
Great pass for Damon Hill, getting him just before the entry into one, so that Schumacher had to wait until the exit to get around. That first corner is where Schumacher had an interesting experience a couple of years ago. He lost his rear wing on that straightaway and spun off into the gravel.
And again, you see when Frentzen backs off to let Schumacher go, suddenly he loses ground to Eddie Irvine, who catches him up.
And that is a battle for position. Frentzen 10th and Irvine 11th.
Irvine using the development Peugeot engine this weekend. They tried it in practice and qualifying very successfully. They thought it would be good enough to use here, so it's the Evolution 2B, I believe, EV2B, I believe the Peugeot engine is called, and hopefully it will be reliable.
Speaking of reliability, see 19 cars listed. We have lost 5. Let's take a look at our Haviland race recap. Damon Hill has led every lap thus far. Right now, Michael Schumacher is right there. The car's out of the race. Mika Hakkinen, whose Mercedes engine apparently let go. Giovanni Lavaggi into the sand trap. Roberto Moreno and Taki Inoue. No update on Inoue, who was hit hard in the left leg by the safety car as he ran to his stricken machine with a fire extinguisher. Pedro Diniz is also out, so the entire 40 team is now on the sidelines. 19 cars remain in the race.
Now what's going to happen? Johnny Herbert is the next car up to be lapped. Will he give Damon Hill a a hard time when Damon has to lap him and give an advantage to Michael Schumacher. Oh, look at that. Damon Hill under braking, turn to the apex much faster. Herbert turns in. This is the top of the hill through the chicane. 80 miles an hour through these chicanes. Yes, he moves over. Oh, and he jumps on the brakes to let Michael Schumacher through. There's a man trying to hold on to his drive for the rest of the season.
Now, once again, it is simply Hill against Schumacher.
0.6 of a second in a straight fight. Schumacher lost 15 plus seconds earlier when he tried to pass David Coulthard at the start of this race. He's made all that time up. Now it is a straight fight here between the two men who are contesting the World Championship. Can Damon Hill hold off Michael Schumacher?
Schumacher with the tighter line, and John Alesi's number 27 Ferrari is being backed into the garage.
A shambles this whole weekend has been for Jean Alesi. After he hit that wall earlier on Friday, he went to 2 different hospitals to make sure he was okay. Spun again Saturday. Had trouble this morning. Had an early pit stop, and now his day is over. You see Damon Hill, though, in the twitch, going through that long left-hander. Both of these cars are absolutely on the limit. That's the key. Run it on the ragged edge, but don't make a mistake. Look at Schumacher fights with the Benetton.
Great stuff. Two of the best of the world at what they do. Damon Hill gets off the track to the left. Schumacher lunges. Hill parries.
Oh, Hill made a mistake there. We were on board with Michael Schumacher. You saw Damon Hill goes offline. You saw the brown dust and sand. This racetrack is so dirty offline, and it almost caught Damon Hill out. Oh, this is great stuff. This is what it's all about, Formula One racing. Two cars finally battling for the lead spot. We haven't seen that much this year, but Damon Hill trying to hang on, and now he drops Michael Schumacher to the tune of 1.5 seconds. How good will this team be when Michael Schumacher leaves? Will Ross Brawn leave? Johnny Herbert is now 8th place. He was lapped earlier. Ross Brawn, their very talented designer, he may also leave and go to Ligier. Here's Damon Hill's problem. Gets it sideways. Runs out of room almost. Manages to gather it up before Michael Schumacher gets through. And look at the last lap. Cost him 3 seconds and cost Michael Schumacher almost 4 seconds over his fastest lap. Look at the sand now still being picked up.
Same place on the racetrack where Damon almost lost it a lap ago. Someone obviously got off there ahead of them.
Now, for some reason, Damon Hill suddenly pulls out over Michael Schumacher.
Schumacher could be getting close to another pit stop. Ooh, just about runs afoul. Look what happens to him when he gets over on the dirty part of the track.
I mean, that looks like a beach offline. There is so much sand offline that gets kicked up by these cars. And, of course, the tires have a habit of picking up, and that sand sticking to the tires, which takes a couple of corners to let things by. Now look at the pit board, plus 1.5. That little indiscretion by Schumacher trying to lap the Arrows car cost him 9/10 of a second, because it was gone up now to 2.5 seconds.
Alesi dropping out. Gerhard Berger making a pit stop puts Mark Blundell now up into the 4th spot. Here's another look at what happened to Michael Schumacher as he tried to come around. Max Papis gets over on the dirty part of the racetrack and almost swaps ends.
In fairness to Max Papis, he was already all over the curves on the left-hand side. There was nothing else he could do. He tried his best to get out of the way of Michael Schumacher, and Schumacher had no option but to hope it was grip offline along the beach.
Desperately hard work on a hot day in Hungary. Before the race, we watched as Gerhard Berger had both of his hands very carefully taped to prevent the blisters that come with so much twisting and turning and shifting. Very difficult work. Hill, Schumacher, Coulthard, Mark Blundell, Rubens Barrichello is 5th, Gerhard Berger now 6th, Martin Brundle 7th, Johnny Herbert 8th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 9th, Eddie Irvine 10th. 7 cars on the lead lap.
And a great fight on our hands here. Damon Hill, who scored his 10th pole position, his 4th in succession, but pole positions have not been friendly to him because they have not translated into results. Now he's in a traffic jam again. Schumacher does seem to be a little bit faster when they're by themselves, but Damon Hill got a good run in traffic here. The Pacific moves over, moves aside.
We'll step away quickly. We have more pit stop action coming. Stand by for more from the Grand Prix of Hungary. We are back live at the Grand Prix of Hungary, but we want to remind you about Sunday Night Baseball here on ESPN tonight, live from the Astrodome. The New York Mets and the Houston Astros at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Back on the racetrack, Michael Schumacher having a terrible time trying to get around his former Benetton teammate, Martin Brundle. Schumacher decides to dive for the pits. 3rd pit stop for the world champion. And we have a long way to go yet. Once again, we'll remind you the latest details on the passing of baseball legend Mickey Mantle coming up on Sports Weekly after this live race from Hungary.
So that was 4 seconds longer than his very first pit stop, so he obviously took on more fuel. Now, what is going to happen? How long can Damon Hill run before he has to make a 3rd pit stop? Does Michael Schumacher have to make a 4th pit stop? The man who sometimes tries to go with just 1. He may have to make 4 pit stops. So Damon Hill, who got a bad run in traffic earlier, then got a very good run, now increases his lead quite substantially over Michael Schumacher, but it'll all disappear again when he has to make what we presume is at least 1 more pit stop.
Taki Inouye. Excuse me, Fukio Katayama has the Tyrrell parked up against the rail. Black marks on the racetrack probably indicate his flight off the racetrack. Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher and David Coulthard. Don't try this at home, kids. I'm a trained professional. Gerhard Berger brings the Ferrari in. Teammate Alesi is out.
So more pit stop action than we have seen for a long time. Barrichello's also in. Mark Blundell is also in the McLaren. Blundell had been running in 4th. Look at this, a drag race down the pit lane. Barrichello sneaks out ahead of Gerhard Berger. They went in 5th and 6th. Barrichello went in ahead of Berger. Now the outlap becomes vitally important.
The Pacific, where Andrea Montermini is in. Notice the extra wing on top of the rear wing and all of the flaps. Teams loading the cars up, trying to get every bit of downforce for cornering speed.
As many as 9 rear wing flaps on the back of some of these cars. Damon Hill sneaks down the inside of one of the Minardis. They run in tandem. Pedro Lamy and Luca Badoer. Pedro Lamy, who has been away for 15 months from Formula 1 following that horrific crash in testing with a Lotus car at Silverstone when the rear wing broke from the car, destroyed it, and broke his leg very badly.
There is Max Papis and a lot of very deliberate action there in the Arrows pit. Papis in trouble. We have an update on his teammate, Taki Inouye, who was hit by the safety car heavily after he climbed out of his stricken Arrows and lunged for a fire extinguisher. Inouye has been taken to the hospital, but the team is indicating to us that they don't think it is anything worse than some severe bruising of his left leg. Now, Michael Schumacher's most recent pit stop came on lap number 47. We are working lap number 50 of 77 right now.
Frentzen, who was in the top 10, then up to 8th, then he ran 7th right before this pit stop. He'll drop down again after this stop, but Damon Hill clear sailing. Knows what it's like to win here. In fact, won his very first Grand Prix here. 23.4 seconds. 1 more pit stop will take most of that lead away. And then the question is, how far can they run? And can they run to the finish without a 4th pit stop? Unheard of this season. But the reason is these soft tires. The cars are so much faster, 1.3 seconds a lap faster in qualifying than they were last year. Now remember, that's with a smaller engine. 3-liter engine this year, less downforce, and yet these cars are still 1.3 seconds a lap faster than they went last year. So as the FIA try to control these rules and regulations and slow these cars down, you tell me who knows more about how to make Formula One cars go faster. The engineers, or do the FIA know how to make them go slower? I think the engineers win every time.
Sooner or later. In fact, the FIA has taken that into account. The most recent directive is that the teams must decide how to slow the cars in the future. Here are the top qualifiers and where they're running in the race right now. Damon Hill first, David Coulthard third, Michael Schumacher in second, Gerhard Berger fading in the Ferrari, Mika Hakkinen and John Alesi out.
And traffic has played such an important part. Here Schumacher is running second, now trying to get by Berger in the Ferrari. Will Berger move over? Remember, he's in that battle with Barrichello right ahead of him. So I think he'd probably let him by, but he won't literally get on the brakes and move over and make it easy for him because he loses too much time to Barrichello. Under braking, just gets on the brakes a tad early, allows Schumacher to slip down the inside as we get a good look at those lights on the dashboard which are connected to the rev limiter on the engine. The engine's rev so fast that those lights go on every 200 revs to help the driver know when to pull the lever on the steering wheel and change gears. Mika Salo, who learned a bit about this racetrack on his laptop computer at home, trying to get familiar with the corners before he ever got here, as Katayama takes the long and lonely walk back to tell Uncle Ken what happened. And we don't think it was a mechanical failure, but he takes time to sign an autograph.
Hope he didn't sign Taki Inuya.
I wonder, does he sign his name in Japanese or in English?
Former high school track star from Japan, now a Grand Prix driver. Here comes the world champion, Michael Schumacher. 3 cars remain on the lead lap. Only Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, and David Coulthard. We'll be back to Hungary. This was the scene in Germany last Wednesday as world champion Michael Schumacher and Corinna Betsch tied the knot in Germany. In fact, it was their second attempt. The first one was stopped by hordes of fans. There you see the wedding band that now adorns the finger of Michael Schumacher. A man with a new family and perhaps a new team in the near future, although he's doing everything he can this weekend to deny it. There he is on the racetrack, having gotten around Rubens Barrichello, the 8th place car. Michael Schumacher is second, but Damon Hill is looking harder and harder to catch. That 54 laps means Damon Hill has already crossed the start-finish line. Michael Schumacher is still in the final corner.
And I believe it's more than 24 seconds, 23, let's have a look, 29 seconds now. That's as big a gap as it's been all race long. Schumacher had a little bit of trouble getting by Gerhard Berger. Then he followed Barrichello for a while. However, when they run by themselves, Damon Hill still seems to have the edge on speed over Michael Schumacher at this particular juncture in the race.
23 laps remaining. Will Schumacher have to stop again? Based on his past pit stop intervals, I would say yes, he does. Oh, someone got off in the kitty litter there.
And we presume Damon Hill will have to stop again. Now at 29 seconds, that is more than enough time for Damon Hill to get in, get serviced, and get out. Whoa! It was
Johnny Herbert. Ooh, testing the limits of traction there on a very, very dusty, slippery Hungaroring circuit. This is an interesting racetrack. What you see, the pavement, the guardrails, and a bit of grandstand, are virtually the only property owned by the racetrack. Everything on the infield there, including all those trees, is owned by a local landowner. An older woman who every year has to be negotiated with about allowing them to use the interior of the racetrack for the Grand Prix.
That's Mark Blundell. Peels off in the McLaren. Until he did that, believe it or not, there were 5 Brits in the top 6. Hill, Coulthard, Brundle, Herbert, and Mark Blundell.
Was there a puff of blue smoke before Blundell came in? I think there might have been. And the reaction of the team tells you we're not running out there with tires and fuel.
It's over. He's on the radio now talking to Ron Dennis. That's why he looks over to the pit lane. So the second Mercedes-Benz engine blows up. In fact, Mercedes-Benz made a statement in Germany that they're quite prepared to go through a learning curve this season, but if they do not win next year, they may be forced to pull the plug on their Formula One activities. They have to win. There is no other reason to be in Formula One. And Mercedes-Benz threatening that if success does not come, they may go and play at some other game.
Once again, it is the pressure. Here's a look at Mark Blundell pitting very slowly. A little bit of a stream of blue smoke behind him. Maybe a little premature to decide the engine did blow up, but certainly the problems have stopped the Mercedes team, which ironically is dominating perhaps the single most high-tech racing series in the world, the German touring cars, the DTM. This is David Coulthard, in for what we assume will be his final stop from third place.
He had a good stop the last time, and the last 3 pit stops also that David Coulthard had, Damon Hill came in on the next lap, 8.9 seconds. That looked quite good. We presume he can now go to the end of the race. And will Damon Hill now peel off and make his pit stop number 3, his third pit stop? Schumacher, I don't think, is fast enough to take the lead of the race if Damon Hill does stop. And of course, then Damon Hill would have a fresher set of tires to carry him to the end of the race. Then Schumacher will. Damon Hill passes the pits this time.
You mentioned Mercedes going without a victory. Last year was the first year in Ron Dennis's tenure with McLaren International that they went a full season without winning a race. Now remind yourselves, this is a team that is used to having world champions, 2 if not 1, on their driver's strength. Last year they went a whole season without winning a race. It could happen again this year.
And they're trying hard to put the pieces to have a better foundation as Mark Brundle comes in. We know that the very talented designer, American designer Steve Nichols, has gone there to add his engineering strengths to McLaren. We don't know yet whether he will be the chief designer of the next year's McLaren, but they are struggling right now. They need some talent in there to make these cars go faster.
There's Eddie Irvine. Here comes Luca Badua. Up front, there is Damon Hill, working lap number 57. And there you see the gap, 32 seconds, enough to come in for a splash of fuel, take about 8 seconds, get new tires on, get down the pit lane at 75 miles an hour, and get back into the race ahead of the world champion. We're about to find out.
And do we know what's going on or what? We knew this was about to happen. Damon Hill, he doesn't need anything spectacular here. He just needs a good average pit stop. A good job by everybody. Get back out. He will retain the lead and run to the end, knowing that he has the speed to match Michael Schumacher. This looks good. 8.3, exactly what he needed. Schumacher will not get the lead. And now it's a straight fight, and I'm not convinced Schumacher has the speed. However, how much of a role will traffic play? Great shots there from Hungarian television to catch the gap back to Michael Schumacher. All the way back, because that is Johnny Herbert running just ahead of his team leader.
The world champion with his hands full this weekend. The track continues to dirty up with all those marbles offline.
And we mentioned the movement of talented designers. The man who's responsible for putting this car down on paper, Ross Brawn, we mentioned it earlier. He may move to the Ligier team. He says he won't, but that doesn't mean anything in F1. He's been brought along by Tom Walkinshaw. He was responsible for the very successful Jaguar Group C cars that won the World Championship more than once. Now he's responsible for the World Championship winning Benetton of last year for this year's car. And don't be surprised to see Tom Walkinshaw make an attractive offer to take Ross Brawn to the French Ligier team or to the English Ligier team.
We'll have more designer news when we return. Stay with us. On board a camera, a quick look there, mounted on the nose of Johnny Herbert's Benetton. He pits from the number 4 spot on the racetrack, but that position flatters. Johnny has had a rough weekend of it and has been running in the nether regions of the top 10 for much of this Grand Prix of Hungary. Back onto the racetrack he comes. First look we've had at this camera today.
And Johnny Herbert knows that Jos Verstappen, who has tested in the Benetton not too long ago at Silverstone, is still trying to convince. Look at this. Panis drops the clutch and gets her sideways. But Jos Verstappen is still trying to convince Briatore to move him into that car to give Briatore a good look at Verstappen before the end of the season, with view to possibly joining John Alesi in this team next season.
Talked about Ross Brawn perhaps leaving Benetton to go with Ligier. Steve Nichols is with McLaren. Will have some input into their new design for 1996. Nick Wirth, late of the Simtech team, the age of 28, the youngest team owner in Formula One until his dream went bankrupt and was auctioned off for a fraction of its value in recent weeks. Nick Wirth has been signed by the Benetton team. Right now they designate him as a special projects engineer. One of the Tyrrells at Mika Salo in the Tyrrell. No drive. Nick Wirth has caught on with the Benetton team. May find himself as technical director as soon as next year. And Salo not pulling off the racetrack. Looks like he might be trying to get that one around. Moving very slowly. Meanwhile, back aboard with Michael Schumacher. 3 cars on the lead lap. Hill, Schumacher, and Coulthard. There you see the gap. Damon Hill's last stop left him with an 11-second cushion with fresher tires and presumably enough fuel to go the distance. The question now, will Michael Schumacher need a 4th stop before this race is done?
And when you run up front, you do get the television coverage. It was an interesting statistic. You see Salo still under his own power, but between Benetton and Williams, they hogged 83% of all the television coverage last season of Grand Prix racing. So you can see how vital it is to run up front. And when you do that, you get huge global coverage, which is what Grand Prix racing and motor racing in general is all about now, and what sponsorship is all about. Global advertising platforms making statements about your company, and what a return it is when you can run at the front with a team like Benetton or Williams.
Well, we discussed this in Germany. Could a driver possibly be worth the $25 million this man, Michael Schumacher, is rumored to be getting from Ferrari next year? Well, if you talk to advertising professionals, they'll tell you. You put your sponsor logos on the front page of the sports section in newspapers around the world, on the TV screens for 85% of a 2-hour broadcast every weekend, you could be worth 20 or 25 million a year. Certainly the consensus was the late Ayrton Senna, the greatest pole winner of all time in Formula One, was definitely worth that amount of money, perhaps every weekend, because of the good he did for his sponsors with his performances. Speaking of Senna, the brass plaque marking his grave site at Morumbi Cemetery in Sao Paulo was stolen, but it has been recovered. We'll talk about that later. Coming up following our coverage of the Grand Prix of Hungary, Sports Weekly with Jack Edwards. Remembering Mickey Mantle, covering all the action from Major League Baseball last night, and a look at the NFL preseason games. Plenty of excitement and great memories coming your way next on Sports Weekly. There is Mika Salo, who has given up the good fight trying to get his Yamaha-powered Tyrrell back to the pits. He will now walk in. Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, and David Coulthard are out front. There you see the full field. Those 15 cars, well, make those 14 now. Well, the only 14 still running in the race. Mika Salo, the most recent departure, following Mark Blundell, Ukio Katayama, Max Papis, John Alesi, Pedro Diniz, Taki Inoue, Roberto Moreno, Giovanni Lavaggi, and Mika Hakkinen, all out of this Grand Prix of Hungary. Not far from the river Duna, as it's known in Hungary, immortalized by Johann Strauss as the Blue Danube, and right down through the city of Budapest. About 10 miles away, the Hungaroring, where Damon Hill returns to the track where he won his first Grand Prix victory back in 1993. And he never needed a victory more. There is Michael Schumacher running in second, perhaps content to take second-place points.
He has such a comfortable lead now in the World Championship that if he can't be first, second is a lot of points, and Damon Hill really needs a win and Schumacher not to finish, because there aren't that many races left. We're just over halfway through this season, and it will be a fight from here on in, but Schumacher has such an advantage having such a big lead in the Drivers' Championship. Interesting, Williams now has a technical agreement with Komatsu. Komatsu, of course, a well-known name in heavy machinery, and one of the reasons for that agreement is to work on the hydraulics and transmissions, and of course hydraulics has been their downfall this year because hydraulic pump failure, which drives the gearbox and the throttle, has cost them so many points and so many finishes this year. It'll be interesting to see how that Komatsu technical affiliation works, whether it will make Williams more reliable and in fact give them an advantage.
If the race were to end right now, Michael Schumacher's lead over this man, Damon Hill, for the World Championship would be 17 points with 7 races remaining. I mentioned earlier the case involving the bronze grave marker for the late Ayrton Senna, which was stolen from the Morumbi Cemetery, was recovered by police during a drug bust. They found a young addict who said he was offered $1 million by a Formula One fan from Japan for the gravesite marker. But it has been recovered and replaced. Look at the track. At this point, it's a matter of trying to steer between the dirty parts of this Hungaroring circuit. Great battle here. This is Gerhard Berger 5th, Martin Brundle 6th, Eddie Irvine 7th, and in 8th, Johnny Herbert.
And this has been a great fight. Remember last year in the closing laps, Gerhard Berger was following Martin Brundle and eventually attacked him, drove down the inside over the grass and took both of them out of the race. But now it's Martin Brundle trying to make advances on Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. But this is a great fight here. 5th, 6th, and 7th, all in a line here. Difficult to pass, but precious championship points here at stake, particularly for this man here, Eddie Jordan. Or Eddie Irvine.
Well, Eddie Jordan, too.
For Eddie Jordan.
Eddie Jordan would be the first to agree with you that it's his you-know-what on the line as well. The blue car is 6th and will pick up 1 championship point unless the multicolored and multi-decaled car of Eddie Irvine can get around him and take that point away.
Other strong rumor is that Barrichello, Eddie Irvine's teammate, may move to Benetton next season.
We'll be back with more live from Hungary. Back in Hungary, on a track so short, so tight, so dirty, it's hard to believe these drivers in the Formula One Grand Prix of Hungary can lap at an average speed of about 112 miles per hour. Yet they do. Now, if the race were to end right now, here's the way the points would stack up. Michael Schumacher down to a 17-point lead over Damon Hill. Jean Alesi out of the race. David Coulthard runs 3rd. He would close up on Alesi for 3rd in the championship. Johnny Herbert is still out there running as well. And meanwhile, Martin Brundle parks the Ligier after a great race. 10th is where he was shown when he departs, but he was running well up into the points. That is a shame for him, but it will boost Eddie Irvine into the 6th and final points-paying position behind Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Rubens Barrichello, and Gerhard Berger. Barrichello having a sneaky race. Somehow he finds himself up in the 4th spot.
And look how quickly Eddie Irvine closed up on the back of Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, which indicates that he may have a little bit of a speed advantage over that Ferrari. But Gerhard Berger will be one of the toughest men to pass here. And Johnny Herbert's in the middle of this fight also. So 5th, 6th, and 7th are still in a line, as they have been since lap 1 of this race. Thank you for thumbs up.
I wonder what that means in Hungarian.
He liked what I said.
Another fan spoken for.
Speaking of fans, there's a record crowd here, and most of them are German, or a good portion of them are German, waving their Schumacher flags. Such a huge following now from Germany because of what Michael Schumacher has accomplished.
When we came here in the late 80s, before the Berlin Wall came down, the borders were somewhat open between Hungary and what was once East Germany. And the rumor was up and down the pit lane that most of those Germans here in attendance were not to watch the Grand Prix, but to get out of East Germany and into Hungary, from where they would go to Austria and then to West Germany or other parts. And of course, those barriers are now down, and everyone is here to cheer on their hero, Michael Schumacher. There you see some of the gaps. This battle for 5th continues.
The man who speaks his mind, Eddie Irvine. Norbert Haut from Mercedes was one of the people who said he is definitely one of the up-and-coming young drivers of Grand Prix racing, and very much the future of Grand Prix racing. He has outshone Rubens Barrichello. Until very recently was faster than him all this weekend, although Barrichello currently runs in 4th place, mainly because of what happened to Eddie Irvine when he was disqualified from that 7th place qualifying position. There's Barrichello right ahead of him, so now you've actually got 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th all on the front straight here. But this is the dogfight. This is the scrap. Look at Berger, moves down to the inside, telling Eddie Irvine, I will not make things easy for you. Look at this, has a sneaky look down the inside. Johnny Herbert gets to watch everything from behind, but Eddie Irvine needs to make sure he doesn't fall foul of Gerhard Berger's tactics and make a mistake here.
Good look there from the nose of Johnny Herbert's car up to the Peugeot of Eddie Irvine. We'll be right back. 5 laps remaining for race leader Damon Hill and his efforts to pick up another victory and come to terms with Michael Schumacher in the World Championship. He can't do it all today, but he will take a big step forward. Schumacher runs 2nd, David Coulthard 3rd. Behind him, Rubens Barrichello, Gerhard Berger, Johnny Herbert now in the 6th spot. Let's take a look. As we went to commercial, Herbert came alongside Eddie Irvine, but the pass not as dramatic as it could have been. Irvine is in trouble.
He is in deep trouble. No sooner had we said he cannot afford to make a mistake than he has a mechanical glitch here, and Johnny Herbert pulls out and slices by. Eddie Irvine then made his way back to the pit lane very, very slowly, still under his own drive, still under his own power, but he is out of the Hungarian Grand Prix. There he is. He helps push his own car down pit lane. The mechanics pushing his car down pit lane in the qualifying session was deemed to be outside assistance. That was why he was disqualified from his 7th place qualifying run on Saturday.
Meanwhile, Damon Hill, as the laps continue to dwindle, his hopes of the World Championship in 1995 may be flickering to life just that little bit. Is this man bearing the number 1 plate? Will he carry it to Ferrari next year as Alain Prost did before him? That remains to be seen with 7 races to go in the World Championship. At this point, Michael Schumacher apparently content to take 2nd place points, but Johnny Herbert still right up there on Gerhard Berger's gearbox, trying to force the vastly experienced man into a mistake. I don't think that audio was coming from Johnny Herbert's car. He still appears to be at full tilt boogie down mode. Now Schumacher slowly.
We heard the audio, and I'm sure it was Schumacher's in-car audio. We heard an engine die, and no doubt it was Michael Schumacher's.
What was that discussion about the mechanical reliability of the Benetton team?
This is breakdown number 1 for Michael Schumacher this season. The glitch I mentioned in Canada at the top of the show, of course, was when the steering wheel had to get reprogrammed, and of course he sets the ground on fire with the exhaust as he comes off.
Oh, crossing the racetrack, a very dangerous move by officials. Very dry on the infield. They have to be careful to avoid a larger conflagration. And look at all the trash picked up on those very, very sticky D-compound Goodyear tires. Nevertheless, the point is Michael Schumacher is done, and suddenly Damon Hill's potential 4-point gain in the World Championship suddenly becomes a 10-point gain.
And that's exactly what we mentioned about 4 or 5 laps earlier, that Damon Hill needs to win and Michael Schumacher not finish, and they are astounded at the Benetton pit, which leaves us now with the potential for Williams having their very first 1-2 of the season, and Barrichello moving onto the podium to also enjoy the champagne.
That will put David Coulthard 2nd, Rubens Barrichello 3rd. This battle now becomes one for 4th place. Gerhard Berger and Johnny Herbert. Heinz-Harald Frentzen up into 6th. Olivier Panis 7th. Luca Badois 8th. Pedro Lamy 9th. Jules Bouillon 10th. Followed by Montermini, And here comes Johnny Herbert's assault on Gerhard Berger with just a couple of laps to go. It's going to be interesting to see where Michael Schumacher finds himself in the results. There were 5 cars behind him, each 1 lap down. Badouar 2 laps down. Pedro Lamy and Jules Bouillon 3 laps down. 11 cars remain running. There is Michael Schumacher.
And the World Constructors' Championship now will take a big turn in favor of Williams as Frentzen runs with the rear gurney flap hanging off that rear wing. Hopefully he has noticed that the downforce will not be as much or not be as high on that rear wing as it was earlier, causing oversteer. He can struggle on to the finish. But the World Constructors' Championship now, first and second place points for the Williams team, and only 1 car, Johnny Herbert, about to take points. We hope about to take points for the Benetton team, but he still has to be careful and not try and lunge past Gerhard Berger, who will chop your nose off at the least opportunity, and Frentzen is in 6th place, joining in this battle. Berger is barely hanging on here. Barely hanging on, trying to hold off Johnny Herbert and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Oh, Herbert has a good run off the corner. Right up behind him, but the V12 seems to have the legs of the Renault V10 down this long, long front straight. 180 miles an hour during qualifying, slightly slower now towards the end of this race.
Herbert drops back a couple of car lengths to make another run at it. He has to pick his spot very carefully. As you mentioned, Derek, it could be very hard to get around Berger on any racetrack, but on this racetrack, on the final lap of the Grand Prix in the points, he'll have to be very circumspect indeed. Meanwhile, Damon Hill begins his final tour. By now, he no doubt knows that Michael Schumacher is standing by the side of the racetrack, and he can cut the lead in the World Championship to 11 points.
And finally breaks that string of pole positions without a win. 4 consecutive pole positions. Virtually nothing to show for it, but today, pole, speed, and win. And the best possible scenario with Michael Schumacher dropping out to tighten up the World Championship chase. Beginning to kick back in Damon Hill's favor now, who hopefully has enough handling in this Williams to be a contender against Schumacher for the rest of the season. The Williams cars have only finished 2 cars twice this season, Imola and France, but this will be their first 1-2 of the year.
The next stop will be the Grand Prix of Belgium on the ultra-high-speed circuit at Spa-Francorchamps. Recall at Hockenheim, the Williams cars excelled on those high-speed circuits, so Damon Hill could be in good shape with Belgium. In fact, Monza to follow in September is also very quick. So Damon Hill could be looking at making this a very exciting championship. He can afford to slow and drive over to the pit wall to salute his mechanics. Damon Hill has come through when he absolutely had to. And look at the traffic and the debris offline for Damon Hill. In his 44th Grand Prix, he picks up another victory. We'll be back with more live coverage. Stand by for more from Hungary. Welcome back live to the Grand Prix of Hungary, where we have had a dramatic development at the finish. Notice the car creeping along. That was the 3rd place car of Rubens Barrichello, Gerhard Berger, Johnny Herbert, and the rest of the field comes streaming by. Heinz-Harald Frentzen moves up. A terrible disappointment for Barrichello. There is Damon Hill celebrating victory, a victory that he needed so desperately. Here's a look at the final results. Damon Hill, David Coulthard in a Williams 1-2, Gerhard Berger 3rd, Johnny Herbert 4th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 5th, Olivier Panis 6th. That means that...